The conference room on the 42nd floor of Hanul Tower fell completely silent. 12 men in expensive suits sat frozen around the polished mahogany table, none daring to breathe too loudly. Outside, through floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul's skyline glittered in the evening light, beautiful, distant, uncaring. Cha Min-woo stood with his back to them all, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the city. His reflection in the glass was perfect, tailored black suit, broad shoulders, the kind of stillness that only comes from absolute control. When he finally turned to face the room, his expression was terrifyingly calm. He reached into his jacket and removed a photograph. Placed it on the table. Slid it forward with one finger. The image showed a woman being escorted into a black sedan on a crowded Myeongdong street. Even through the graininess of the surveillance shot, the fear on her face was unmistakable, eyes wide, lips parted, looking over her shoulder. But that wasn't what made Min-woo's blood run cold. It was the man standing behind her, smiling directly at the camera. A man Min-woo had watched die 3 years ago. "Someone in this room knows where she is," Min-woo said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner. No one moved. No one spoke. "Mavis Tate," he continued, placing both hands flat on the table. "She has worked in my household for 11 months. She knows my schedule. My preferences. My family." His eyes moved from face to face. 3 days ago, she disappeared. No notice. No call. Nothing. One of the younger executives, Park Jin-ho, newly promoted, still learning the boundaries, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, with respect, she's just a housekeeper. Perhaps she simply quit." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Min-woo's eyes shifted to the man who spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Just a housekeeper," he repeated softly. "Is that what you think?" Park went pale and stopped talking. "Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would the most powerful man in Seoul tear the city apart for a housekeeper? Trust me, I'm getting there. But this story? It's about to take turns you won't see coming. If you're into stories about secrets, unexpected connections, and dangerous games, you're definitely in the right place. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because what happens next? You don't want to miss a single second. Here's what everyone in Seoul's elite circles knew about Cha Min-woo. His family had built an empire spanning construction, entertainment, and international trade. On paper, he was a legitimate businessman. But whispers followed him everywhere, rumors of connections to organizations that operated in shadows, of debts collected in ways that never involved courts or lawyers. People called him the gentleman behind his back. Not because he was kind. Because he never raised his voice, even when destroying someone's entire life. At 34, Min-woo carried himself with the kind of presence that made powerful men shrink. Sharp jawline. Cold, calculating eyes. Always impeccably dressed, not a single detail out of place. But it wasn't his wealth or his looks that made him dangerous. It was his patience. The way he could wait, and watch, and remember everything. 3 years ago, his wife Eun-ji had died in what was officially called an accident. A car crash on a rainy night. He'd never accepted that explanation, but he'd never spoken publicly about his doubts either. What everyone did know was that after her death, he'd retreated further into himself, becoming something colder, harder. The only soft spot in his armor was Soo-yeon. His 10-year-old daughter who, since her mother's passing, had barely spoken a complete sentence to anyone. The bright, chatty child she'd once been had vanished, replaced by a ghost-like girl who moved silently through the vast Cha estate. Min-woo had hired and fired 7 housekeepers in the span of 2 years. None could handle the pressure, the demanding father, the silent child, the heaviness that seemed to permeate the mansion's walls. Then Mavis Tate arrived. She came on a rainy Tuesday morning, 11 months before her disappearance. The exclusive neighborhood of Pyeongchang-dong, nestled against Bukhansan Mountain, housed diplomats, celebrities, and old money families who valued privacy above everything. She was 29, tall, with warm brown skin and natural hair she kept in neat twists. When Mrs. O, the elderly head housekeeper, opened the door, she found a woman standing perfectly straight despite the heavy rain, a single suitcase at her feet. "Miss Tate?" Mrs. O had asked, squinting through her glasses. "Yes. I'm expected." Her voice was clear, with the slightest hint of a Southern American accent. There was something in her eyes that seemed older than her years. Something watchful. Something careful. The agency had described her as discreet, professional, and fluent in English, the perfect candidate to manage a household with an international businessman and his American-educated daughter. What they didn't say, what nobody knew then, was that Mavis Tate was running from something. That she'd been running for years. That Seoul was just the latest stop in a journey that had taken her across continents, always looking over her shoulder, always ready to disappear again. A hospitality management graduate from Spelman College, one of America's most prestigious historically black colleges, working as a housekeeper halfway around the world. It didn't make sense. Not unless you knew what, or who, she was hiding from. Her first meeting with Min-woo had been brief, cold, transactional. He'd barely looked up from his documents when Mrs. O brought her to his study. "My daughter needs structure, not sympathy," he'd said. Previous staff made the mistake of trying to be her friend. They were terminated. "Do your job, Miss Tate. Nothing more." "Understood, sir," she'd replied, voice steady. He'd finally glanced up then, something flickering in his expression, surprise, perhaps, that she hadn't flinched. Most people flinched around him. "You may go," he dismissed her. What Min-woo didn't expect, what no one could have predicted, was how quickly things would change after that. How Mavis Tate would transform not just his daughter, but his entire world. And now she was gone. The day Mavis Tate disappeared, she didn't just vanish from the Cha estate. She vanished from existence. No note. No call. No trace. And when Min-woo finally discovered why, it would change everything he thought he knew, about her, about his enemies, and about himself. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start where it really began. The day she met the little girl who would change her life. 11 months earlier. Rain fell in heavy sheets, turning Seoul's mountain-nestled neighborhood of Pyeongchang-dong into a blur of grays and greens. The taxi rolled to a stop at a pair of imposing black gates, and Mavis Tate stared through the rain-streaked window at what would be her new home. The Cha estate loomed ahead like something torn from an architectural magazine, clean modern lines blending with traditional Korean elements. 3 stories of glass, stone, and wood perched on the hillside, partially hidden behind perfectly manicured pine trees. Money lived here. Old money. The kind that didn't need to shout. "This is it?" the driver asked, squinting through the downpour. "Yes," Mavis replied, fishing in her wallet for Korean won. She was still getting used to the currency, the different sizes and colors. "Thank you." As she stepped out, the rain immediately soaked into her coat. She pulled her single suitcase from the trunk, just one, medium-sized. Mavis Tate traveled light. Always had. There were reasons for that, reasons she didn't discuss. The intercom beside the gate buzzed when she pressed it, and a woman's voice answered in Korean. Mavis responded in careful, practiced phrases she'd memorized on the flight over. The gate slid open without further question. The smell hit her first, rain on expensive stone, the earthy scent of wet pine, something floral from gardens hidden from view. Her shoes crunched on the gravel path as she wheeled her suitcase behind her, water streaming from the handle onto her already damp fingers. By the time she reached the massive wooden front doors, her hair was dripping, little rivers running down her neck. The doors looked ancient, heavy, hand-carved with subtle patterns, the kind designed to make visitors feel small before they even entered. The right door opened before she could knock. A small, elderly Korean woman stood in the entryway, back perfectly straight despite her age, silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Her expression was neither welcoming nor hostile, simply assessing. "Miss Tate?" she asked, squinting through wire-rimmed glasses. "Yes. I'm expected." Mavis kept her voice steady, professional, with just the slightest hint of her Atlanta accent peeking through. "I am Mrs. O. Please, come in." Stepping inside was like entering another world. The silence hit her first, profound, almost sacred, as if the walls themselves absorbed sound. The rain that had been pounding in her ears moments before was reduced to a distant whisper. The entryway opened into a soaring two-story space, minimalist but unmistakably luxurious. A dramatic staircase curved up one wall. Art pieces that probably cost more than her college education hung at perfect intervals. Everything gleamed, wood polished to a mirror shine, marble floors without a scuff mark, glass without a fingerprint. "You're soaked," Mrs. O observed. "Leave your suitcase. I'll have someone bring it to your quarters once you've changed." Mavis followed the woman through the house, water dripping from her coat onto the immaculate floor. Mrs. O didn't seem to mind, which told Mavis something important. The household staff must be excellent at erasing evidence of human presence. "I'll show you to your room first," Mrs. O said. "Then we'll discuss the household rules before you meet Mr. Cha and his daughter." Mavis nodded, taking in everything as they walked. Security cameras positioned discreetly in corners. The weight of the interior doors, reinforced, though designed not to look it. Windows with a particular thickness to the glass. The multiple exit routes. She catalogued it all automatically, a habit formed from years of needing to know exactly how to leave any space she entered. "The staff wing is here," Mrs. O explained, leading her down a hallway that branched off from the main house. "Your room is at the end. Private bathroom attached." Mr. Cha believed staff should have their own space. The room was simple but comfortable, a queen bed, desk, wardrobe, and a small sitting area near a window that overlooked a side garden. Clean lines, neutral colors. Impersonal but not unwelcoming. "There are fresh clothes in your size in the wardrobe," Mrs. O said. "The staff uniform for formal occasions, and everyday clothes for regular duties. Change and meet me in the kitchen in 15 minutes. When the door closed behind the older woman, Mavis finally allowed herself to exhale. She did a quick, habitual scan: windows, opens fully, ground floor, easy exit, door, solid but not reinforced, closet, walk-in, second exit unlikely. The assessment took seconds, unconscious after years of practice. She changed quickly, hanging her wet clothes in the bathroom. The provided everyday clothes were simple but obviously expensive: black pants, a crisp white button-down, comfortable shoes. All perfectly her size, as promised. 15 minutes later, she found the kitchen, a gleaming space of stainless steel and warm wood that somehow managed to look both professional and unused. Mrs. O was waiting, hands folded at a small table in the corner. She gestured for Mavis to sit. "Tea," she offered, already pouring from a small ceramic pot. "Thank you." The woman studied her over the rim of her cup. "I'll be direct, Miss Tate. This position is challenging. The last 3 housekeepers lasted less than 2 months each. The child is difficult." Mavis sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "Difficult how?" "She doesn't speak. Not since her mother died 3 years ago. At least, not more than a word or two when absolutely necessary. She doesn't engage. Doesn't follow instructions willingly. The previous staff found it frustrating." "I see. Mr. Cha is equally demanding, though in different ways. He values privacy, efficiency, and silence. The house runs on precise schedules. Deviation is not tolerated." Something in Mavis's expression must have shifted, because Mrs. O leaned forward slightly. "If you wish to reconsider, now would be the time. The agency can place you elsewhere." Mavis met the older woman's eyes directly. I don't scare easily, Mrs. O. A flicker of something, surprise, maybe respect, crossed the housekeeper's face. Well, that's good, I suppose. Now, let me show you the rest of the house before you meet them. The tour took nearly an hour. The Cha estate was even larger than it appeared from outside, 5 bedrooms in the main house, a separate office wing, formal and informal dining rooms, a library, a music room with a grand piano no one played anymore, and gardens that wrapped around the property like a protective embrace. Mrs. O pointed out which spaces were Mavis's responsibility, primarily Soo-Yun's areas and the main living spaces, and which belonged to other staff, the kitchens, Mr. Cha's private wing. This is Mr. Cha's study, Mrs. O explained, gesturing to a door at the end of the office wing. It's always locked when he's not in residence. No one enters without his explicit permission. Mavis nodded, noting the state-of-the-art keypad beside the handle. Not just a normal lock then. Whatever was in there, it mattered. The contrast struck her as they walked, between the immaculate, cold perfection of the house and the total absence of warmth. No children's toys left out. No books splayed open. No half-drunk cups of tea forgotten on side tables. It was a house designed for photographs, not living. And this is Miss Soo-Yun's room, Mrs. O said finally, stopping at a door painted soft blue, the only colorful door in the house. The room inside was beautiful, clearly designed by someone who loved the child. Soft colors, a canopy bed, bookshelves filled with children's books in Korean and English. A window seat overlooking the main garden. Everything a little girl should want. But there was a layer of stillness over it all. The toys looked untouched on their shelves. The bed was made with hospital corners. On the nightstand stood several framed photographs of a beautiful Korean woman with a wide smile and eyes exactly like Soo-Yun's. Her mother, Mrs. O said quietly, following Mavis's gaze. Boonji. In the corner of the room, so still that Mavis hadn't immediately noticed her, sat a small girl with long black hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She was hunched over a drawing pad, crayon moving in careful lines, not acknowledging their presence. Miss Soo-Yun, Mrs. O said gently. This is Miss Tate. She's going to be your new housekeeper. The girl didn't look up. Didn't pause in her drawing. It was as if they weren't there at all. Mrs. O looked at Mavis with an expression that clearly said, see what I mean? I'll give you a moment, the older woman said, stepping out and closing the door softly behind her. Mavis stood quietly, observing. The girl's posture was tense, her grip on the crayon too tight. This wasn't peaceful drawing, this was deliberate ignoring. After a moment, Mavis approached, but not too close. She knelt down to be at eye level, though the girl still wouldn't look at her. Hello, Soo-Yun. I'm Mavis, she said, her voice gentle but not syrupy. I'm going to be helping around the house. I won't bother you if you want to be alone. No response. Just the scratch of crayon on paper. Mavis reached into her pocket and pulled out a small package, a set of colored pencils she'd brought from America. Artist quality ones, with colors that didn't quite exist in regular sets. She placed them on the floor beside the girl, not directly in her space but close enough to see. These are from my home in Atlanta. The colors are a little different from the ones here. You can use them if you want. Or not. It's up to you. She stood up, not waiting for acknowledgement. I'll see you at dinner time, okay? As she turned to leave, she caught the briefest flicker of the girl's eyes toward the pencils. Just for a second. Then back to her drawing, face impassive. It was enough. Her final stop was Mr. Cha's study, where Mrs. O had arranged their introduction. The older woman knocked softly on the heavy door. Enter, called a deep voice from inside. Cha Min-woo sat behind a massive desk, not bothering to look up from the documents spread before him. Tall windows behind him framed the still falling rain, making him appear in silhouette, a deliberate power move, Mavis noted. Unable to see his eyes, while he could see hers perfectly. Miss Tate, sir, Mrs. O announced, bowing slightly. Minwoo finally glanced up, his face revealing nothing. In person, he was even more intimidating than in the photographs Mavis had studied before accepting the position. Sharp jawline, broad shoulders, eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense. Handsome in a severe way, like a perfectly carved statue. Miss Tate, he said, voice cool and measured. I trust Mrs. O has explained your duties. Yes, sir, she has. Good. My daughter needs structure, not sympathy. Previous staff made the mistake of trying to be her friend. They were terminated. His eyes met hers directly. Do your job, Miss Tate. Nothing more. Understood, sir, she replied, voice steady. She didn't flinch under his gaze, didn't fidget or look away. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, that she hadn't been intimidated. Most people probably were. The moment passed quickly, but Mavis caught it. A crack in the perfect facade. You may go, he dismissed her. That night, as Mavis unpacked her single suitcase, Mrs. O knocked on her door. The colored pencils, the older woman said without preamble. They're gone from where you left them. Mavis nodded, hiding her small smile. Thank you for telling me. Mrs. O studied her with newfound curiosity. Perhaps you'll last longer than 2 months after all, Miss Tate. That first week, Mavis learned the rhythms of the house. When Minwoo left for work, 6:30 sharp. When he returned, rarely before midnight. When Soo-yeon ate alone in her room, every meal. When the silence became so heavy it felt like a physical weight. She also learned that nobody in this house talked about the woman in the photographs. The beautiful woman with Soo-yeon's eyes. Nobody talked about how she died. Or why, sometimes, late at night, Mavis could hear a little girl crying through the walls. It was on the third day that everything shifted. And it started with a dead butterfly. The morning air was cool and fresh after the previous day's rain. Dew still clung to the grass in the Cha Estate's garden, catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. Mavis stepped outside for a moment of quiet before the household fully woke, a steaming mug of coffee warming her hands. That's when she saw her. Soo-yeon sitting alone on a stone bench near the flower beds, her small back perfectly straight, head bent over something in her hands. She was so still she might have been part of the garden itself. Mavis paused, considering whether to retreat and give the child privacy. But something about the girl's posture, the slight curve of her shoulders, the tension in her neck, spoke of a sadness too heavy for such small shoulders. She approached slowly, footsteps deliberate enough to announce her presence without startling the girl. Soo-yeon didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her. Her entire focus was on what she held in her palm. A butterfly. Blue and black wings spread open but perfectly still. Dead. Mavis stopped a respectful distance away. Good morning, Soo-yeon. The girl didn't respond, didn't look up. She just kept staring at the butterfly, as if waiting for it to suddenly flutter its wings and fly away. Any other adult might have immediately told her to wash her hands. Might have launched into an explanation about the circle of life or heaven for butterflies. Might have tried to distract her with breakfast or school preparations. Mavis did none of those things. Instead, she simply sat down beside her on the cold stone bench. Said nothing. Just existed in the same space, sharing the moment. The silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. Just there, like the morning mist that still hung over the distant parts of the garden. 1 minute passed. Then 2. The girl's thumb moved slightly, gently touching the edge of the butterfly's wing. It won't wake up, Soo-yeon finally whispered, her voice so soft it barely disturbed the air. Mavis felt her heart catch. The first words the child had spoken to anyone in months. She didn't rush to fill the space with chatter or celebration. Instead, she matched the girl's tone. No, she agreed gently. It won't. Another long silence. A bird called somewhere in the distance. But we can remember it was here, Mavis added. Soo-yeon finally looked up at her, dark eyes serious in her small face. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps. Recognition of a shared language that didn't require many words. How? The girl asked. Mavis set her coffee mug on the bench. Would you like to bury it? Make a special place where we can remember it? Slowly, Soo-yeon nodded. Together, they found a quiet spot near the rose bushes. Mavis used a small garden trowel to dig a shallow hole while Soo-yeon watched, still cradling the butterfly. When it was ready, the girl carefully placed the delicate creature in its final resting place. Do you want to say anything? Mavis asked. Soo-yeon thought for a moment, then shook her head. That's okay. We can just think our goodbyes. They covered the butterfly with earth, patting it gently flat. Then Mavis pulled something from her pocket, a popsicle stick she'd saved from Soo-yeon's uneaten ice cream the day before. Here, she said, handing it to the girl. We can mark the spot. Soo-yeon took it solemnly and pressed it into the soft earth above the burial site. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at Mavis. Thank you, she whispered. From his study window, Min-woo stood motionless, watching the scene unfold in the garden below. He delayed his departure for work, telling himself he needed to review some documents before a meeting. But the truth was simpler, he'd wanted to observe the new housekeeper with his daughter. He'd expected to see what he always saw, Soo-yeon ignoring the staff, retreating further into herself. He'd expected to be calling the agency within weeks to request yet another replacement. What he hadn't expected was this, his daughter speaking. Participating. Looking almost peaceful. He watched as they buried what appeared to be a butterfly. Such a simple thing. Yet Soo-yeon was engaged in a way he hadn't seen since before Eun-ji died. Something cracked in his chest. An emotion he'd been carefully suppressing for 3 years. A hope so painful he barely allowed himself to acknowledge it. Min-woo stepped back from the window before they could notice him watching. His throat felt tight. He straightened his tie, gathered his briefcase, and left for work without saying anything to anyone. But that night, he came home 2 hours earlier than usual. Over the following weeks, small changes began to appear in the Cha household. Like spring thawing a frozen pond, they started almost imperceptibly but grew impossible to ignore. Soo-yeon began eating breakfast in the kitchen instead of alone in her room. At first, she would just sit silently, eating whatever Mavis prepared. But by the 3rd morning, she asked for banana slices on her pancakes. By the end of the week, she was helping to mix the batter. Her questions came slowly at first, brief and cautious, as if testing whether it was safe to be curious again. What's Atlanta like? Hot in the summer, Mavis told her, slicing fruit for a snack. But beautiful. Lots of trees. They call it the city in a forest. Do you miss it? Mavis considered this carefully. I miss parts of it. The food. The music. Some people. But not everything. What's your favorite color? Deep purple. Like eggplants. Or the sky just after sunset. Mine is blue, Soo-yeon offered. Like butterfly wings. And there it was, a reference to their shared secret, the butterfly burial that had somehow opened a door neither had expected. The first time Soo-yeon laughed, Mavis almost dropped the book she was reading. They were sitting on the window seat in the girls' room, looking at pictures of strange animals. The platypus illustration had done it, a short, rusty giggle that sounded like Soo-yeon had forgotten how to make the sound properly. It was the most beautiful thing Mavis had heard in years. Min-woo noticed the changes. How could he not? His silent house was developing a pulse again. Subtle signs of life appeared, a child's drawing magnetized to the refrigerator, the sound of voices from the garden, the smell of cookies baking on a Sunday afternoon. He found himself creating reasons to be home. A meeting cancelled. Documents he needed to review in his home office. A video call that could be taken from the study. He began watching from doorways. Listening from hallways. Absorbing the transformation of his daughter like a man dying of thirst. One evening, he returned from work earlier than usual and heard something that stopped him in the hallway: laughter. Not just Soo-yeon's still hesitant giggles, but another voice laughing with her. Warm, rich, genuine. He followed the sound to the kitchen and froze in the doorway. Soo-yeon stood at the island counter, flour dusting her small fingers, her face alight with concentration as she carefully cut shapes from rolled dough. Beside her, guiding her hands with gentle patience, stood Mavis. "That's it," she was saying. "Press down firmly, then twist a little, perfect." Soo-yeon lifted the cookie cutter to reveal a perfect star shape. "Look! I did it. That's the best one yet," Mavis praised, and his daughter beamed, actually beamed, with pride. There was flour on Soo-yeon's cheek. A smudge of dough on Mavis's forehead. The countertop was a disaster of baking supplies. And yet, it was the most beautiful scene he'd witnessed in his home since his wife died. Min-woo stood there for a full minute, unable to move, unwilling to interrupt. Something long dormant in his chest unfurled painfully. He didn't notice Mrs. O appear beside him until she cleared her throat softly. He glanced down at the elderly housekeeper, expecting her to disapprove of the mess. Instead, she was looking at him with an expression that said everything words couldn't. She'd been there since before Soo-yeon was born. Had watched his family break apart after Eunji's death. Had witnessed his retreat into cold isolation. "It's good to hear laughter in this house again," she murmured, barely audible. Min-woo couldn't respond. The lump in his throat wouldn't allow it. The next morning, when Min-woo encountered Mavis in the hallway, something had changed. He looked directly at her, really saw her, perhaps for the first time. "Good morning, Miss Tate," he said, with actual eye contact. "Good morning, Mr. Cha," she replied, surprised by the acknowledgement. That evening, he asked about Soo-yeon over dinner, not the usual perfunctory questions about schoolwork, but genuine interest in her day, her activities, her progress. "She's doing very well," Mavis told him, a gentle warmth in her voice. "She's particularly interested in drawing lately. She has talent." Her mother was artistic, he said quietly, then looked almost surprised at himself for volunteering the information. A week later, when Mavis handed him a document about Soo-yeon's upcoming school events, their fingers brushed briefly. A small, accidental touch that neither acknowledged but both felt. It lingered between them, unspoken. Everything was changing. The house felt lighter. Soo-yeon was healing. Even Min-woo seemed different, less like a ghost, more like a father. For the first time in 6 years, Mavis let herself think the word, home. She should have known better. Because 3,000 miles away, in a high-rise office in Atlanta, a man was looking at a photograph of his own. A photograph of a woman in Seoul. A woman he'd spent 4 years searching for. Mercer Cole smiled as he traced her face on the screen. "Found you," he whispered. And he began making phone calls. 2 months can change everything. When Mavis first got to the Cha house, it felt like a museum, all shiny floors and perfect furniture that nobody actually used. Now, it actually felt like people lived there. The morning sun was just coming up as Mavis stood in the kitchen, getting Min-woo's tea ready. She'd figured out exactly how he liked it by now, not too many tea leaves, water hot but not boiling, that made it bitter, and always in the same ceramic cup. Never glass. He'd mentioned once that glass cooled too quickly, and she'd remembered that tiny detail like everything else about him. There was something weirdly intimate about knowing exactly how someone took their morning tea. Like you'd crossed some invisible line from employee to something else. "Is that for Mr. Cha?" Mrs. O asked, appearing beside her with a basket of bread. "Yeah," Mavis said, putting a little dish of honey on the tray. Min-woo never touched it, but sometimes Soo-yeon would sneak her finger in when she thought nobody was looking. Mrs. O gave her one of those knowing looks. You know, he used to eat alone in his office. Every single day for 3 years. Mavis just smiled and picked up the tray. Minwoo was already at the table, newspaper up like a shield between him and the world. Perfect suit, perfect hair, perfect posture. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was the same cold businessman she'd met on her first day. But Mavis knew better now. "Morning," she said, setting down his tea. He lowered the paper just enough to meet her eyes. "Good morning, Miss Tate." He took a sip, and then gave that tiny nod that meant the tea was perfect. Anyone else would have missed it. Mavis never did. "Daddy." "Mavis. Look what I found." Soo-yeon came running in like a little tornado, still in her pajamas with a sweater thrown on top. Her hair was sticking up everywhere, and she was hugging a book like it was treasure. It was hard to believe this was the same silent kid who'd been burying butterflies a couple months ago. Inside voice, "Soo-yeon," Minwoo said, but his heart wasn't in it. "Sorry," she whispered super dramatically, then immediately went back to normal volume. "But look. It's the book about the girl with the magic paintbrush. I thought I lost it forever, but it was just under my bed." "That's great," Mavis said, pouring orange juice into Soo-yeon's cup. "We can read it later if you want. Can we do the voices again?" "You do the best voices." Minwoo raised an eyebrow. "Voices?" Mavis felt her cheeks get warm. "Sometimes when we read, we kind of act out the parts." "She does this awesome dragon voice that goes all growly," Soo-yeon demonstrated, making her voice super deep. "And the princess voice that's like this." She switched to a high-pitched sing-songy voice. "I had no idea Miss Tate was so theatrical," Minwoo said, and even though his face stayed serious, Mavis caught that little spark in his eyes. "Oh, you should hear her do the evil stepmother," Soo-yeon kept going, completely oblivious to the look passing between the adults. "She's really good at being mean, in the story, I mean. She's not mean for real." "Good to know," Minwoo said, and this time the corner of his mouth definitely twitched up. Mavis busied herself straightening things that didn't need straightening. "I think your dad's trying to read his paper, Soo-yeon." "He's not really reading," the little girl said, mouth full of toast. "He's watching us and pretending to read. He always does that." Minwoo actually coughed, caught off guard, and Mavis had to bite her lip to stop from laughing. From the doorway, Mrs. O made a weird snorting sound like she was trying not to laugh too. "Eat your breakfast," Minwoo said, disappearing behind his newspaper again. But Mavis noticed the paper never turned a page the whole time Soo-yeon chatted about school and her friend's new cat. The library became Mavis's favorite spot in the house. During the day, everyone used it, staff cleaning, Soo-yeon sprawled on the floor with picture books, sometimes Minwoo grabbing a business book. But after 9, when the kitchen was clean and Soo-yeon was in bed, it became Mavis's private world. It was the only room that felt actually warm, not just temperature-wise. Tonight she was curled up in the corner of the big leather couch, Korean textbook on her lap, whispering words to herself. "Annyeonghaseyo," she said slowly, breaking it into pieces. An-young-ha-se-yo. "Not quite right," a voice said from the door. Mavis jumped, almost dropping her book. Minwoo was leaning against the doorframe, no jacket, tie loosened, looking way less like a CEO and more like a regular person. The warm light made him seem younger somehow. "I didn't hear you come in," she said, sitting up straighter. "Most people don't." He stepped into the room and went to the bookshelves like he belonged there. "You're swallowing the middle part. Try again." She felt weirdly self-conscious now. "Annyeonghaseyo." "Better," he nodded. "But let the young part breathe more. Like this, Annyeonghaseyo." He showed her, and she found herself watching his mouth maybe a little more closely than she needed to. "Annyeonghaseyo," she repeated, and it sounded way better. Much better. He pulled a book from the shelf, running his thumb along the spine. Korean's not an easy language to learn. I like challenges, she said. Easy gets boring. Something flickered across his face, like he recognized that feeling. He sat down in the armchair near her. Not too close, not too far. Always careful. What made you want to learn? He asked. She closed her textbook. Seemed rude not to try. I'm living here, after all. A lot of foreigners don't bother. I'm not like a lot of foreigners. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not quite understanding, but maybe wanting to understand. What are you reading? He asked, looking at her textbook. She laughed and held it up to show the cartoon characters on the cover. Super advanced stuff. Elementary Korean 1. I'm still at the point at things and pray stage. The corner of his mouth lifted. Almost a smile, but not quite. Here. He handed her the book he'd taken from the shelf. This might help. Short stories. Simple language. About regular life in Seoul. She took it carefully, their fingers not quite touching. The cover showed a night market with food stalls and bright signs. Thanks, she said, genuinely touched. He nodded, but instead of leaving, he picked up another book and settled deeper into his chair. They sat in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just new. Do you read much? He finally asked. When I can, she said. More when I was younger. The library was free, and quiet. You like quiet? I grew up with a lot of noise, she admitted. Sometimes good noise, music, people laughing. Sometimes, the other kind. He didn't push, but she could tell he was storing this information away. Building a picture of her, piece by piece, just like she'd been doing with him. What kind of stories did you like? He asked instead. Travel books, she answered honestly. Stories about places I'd never seen. Cheapest way to leave Atlanta without actually leaving. And now you're here, he said. Half a world away. Now I'm here, she echoed softly. They talked for a while, about books, about Seoul, about the differences between Korean and American stories. He told her about authors she'd never heard of, she told him about books that got her through childhood. Neither of them mentioned that this was the longest conversation they'd ever had. Or that he had a perfectly good office down the hall where he usually spent his evenings. Tonight, the library belonged to both of them. Please. Pretty please. It's not even that cold. Soo-yeon was standing in the hall, already wearing her coat and boots, bouncing up and down with excitement. Where exactly do you want to go? Min-woo asked, checking his watch. Myeongdong. They have these huge ice cream towers, Min-jae showed me pictures. They're like this tall. She stretched her hand way above her head. Please, Daddy. Mavis can come too. Mavis, who was walking by with clean towels, froze. Oh, I don't want to intrude on your family time. But you are family, Soo-yeon said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Right, Daddy? Something complicated crossed Min-woo's face. Not discomfort exactly. Something harder to name. Miss Tate is probably busy, he started, but Mavis surprised herself by jumping in. Actually, I'm free this afternoon. If that's okay with your dad. Min-woo looked at her face, like he was checking if she really meant it or was just being nice. Deciding she was sincere, he nodded. Get your coat, then. Myeongdong on a Sunday was absolute chaos, street performers playing music, tourists taking pictures everywhere, vendors shouting about their food, and amazing smells coming from every direction. Soo-yeon's eyes were huge as she tried to take it all in. Look. They're putting sauce on the fries like that, she pointed at a vendor doing perfect spirals of sauce. And there. That lady has rainbow hair. Min-woo kept a protective hand on her shoulder. Stay close, he reminded her. It's crowded. For a guy who ran boardrooms and navigated Seoul's cutthroat business world, he looked weirdly out of place here in the middle of normal weekend shoppers. He dressed down, jeans and a simple jacket, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but still had that watchful energy that made him stand out. Over there, Mavis pointed, spotting what they came for. I think that's the ice cream place. They got in line, watching people walk away with impossibly tall swirls of soft serve balanced on cones. Soo-yeon could barely contain herself. I want strawberry. Or maybe chocolate. Or maybe both. One flavor, Min-woo said firmly. Those things look unstable enough already. When Soo-yeon finally got hers, a huge pink swirl that looked ready to topple with each step, her face lit up with such pure joy that Mavis felt something catch in her chest. She glanced at Min-woo and found him watching his daughter with the exact same expression she had, this mixture of tenderness and wonder, like seeing something precious and rare. Careful, Mavis warned as Soo-yeon took her first wobbly steps. If you drop it, I'm not fighting that crowd for another one. I won't drop it, Soo-yeon promised super seriously, then walked with exaggerated care. The walk back was quieter, everyone feeling content after their adventure. The sun was getting lower, making long shadows across the busy streets. Soo-yeon skipped ahead, still on a sugar high from her melting treat. Min-woo and Mavis fell into step beside each other, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel his presence with every step. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching Soo-yeon dart from window to window, pointing at things. Thanks, he said quietly after a bit. For coming today. I should be thanking you, she replied. It's been a long time since I just had fun. He glanced at her. Why did you come to Korea? The question seemed to surprise him as much as her, like he hadn't planned to ask it. She thought about dodging it, like she always did when her past came up. But something about today, the warmth, the normality, the feeling of almost belonging, made her braver than usual. I was looking for somewhere quiet, she said finally. Running from something? He asked, his voice gentle. She kept her eyes on Soo-yeon, not quite brave enough to look at him. Running towards something, she answered after a long pause. I hope. He didn't say anything right away, and when she finally looked at him, she found his eyes already on her face. Something passed between them, not quite understanding, but maybe a willingness to understand. Before either could say anything else, Soo-yeon came running back, squeezing between them and grabbing both their hands. You're walking too slow, she complained, swinging their arms. I'm getting tired. Can't have that, Min-woo said, the moment broken but not forgotten. As they walked home, connected like this, Mavis couldn't help thinking how easy it would be to get used to this. And how dangerous that might be. The black car showed up 3 days later. Mavis spotted it while coming back from the market, arms full of groceries. It was parked just beyond the estate gate, sleek and dark with windows tinted way darker than legal. No neighborhood sticker on the windshield. No driver hanging around. Just sitting there, waiting, like a predator that had picked up her scent. She walked past without obviously staring, but her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Old instincts, never completely gone, came rushing back. Inside the gate, she handed the groceries to one of the younger staff and went looking for Director Kong. She found him in the small security office near the staff entrance, checking camera feeds. Director Kong, she said from the doorway. There's a car outside. Black sedan, no neighborhood sticker. It's been there twice this week. He turned right away, giving her his full attention. Unlike some staff who'd been suspicious of her at first, the foreign woman in their Korean household, Kong had always treated her with respect. Did you see the license plate? He asked, grabbing a notepad. Just part of it, she admitted, telling him the numbers she'd caught. He nodded, writing it down. I'll check it out. Probably nothing. Sometimes tourists drive through to look at the fancy houses, but we don't take chances. Thanks, she said, relieved he was taking her seriously. Miss Tate, he called as she turned to leave. Is there something specific worrying you about this car? She hesitated, the truth stuck in her throat. Just being careful, she said finally. That night, after everyone went to bed, Mavis sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the old house make its nighttime noises. She'd checked her door lock twice. Then the window, even though it was 2 floors up. Then, feeling kind of silly but doing it anyway, she'd pulled out the small duffel bag she kept under her bed and checked what was inside. Clean clothes. Copy of her passport. Cash in different currencies. Basic toiletries. A prepaid phone she'd never used. Everything she'd need to vanish in under 5 minutes. You're being ridiculous, she whispered in the dark. You've been safe for 6 months. He has no reason to look for you here. No way to find you. But even as she said it, her hands were shaking a little. Because she knew better than most how determined some men could be when they felt wronged. How persistent. How patient. Earlier that night, at dinner, Min-woo had asked a simple question that had hit her like a punch. Do you ever miss your family? He'd asked, passing her some kimchi. Back in America? She'd kept her eyes on her plate, feeling Soo-yeon watching her curiously. They're gone, she'd said simply. I'm sorry, he'd replied, and she knew he'd caught that edge in her voice. The way "gone" had sounded final in ways that had nothing to do with distance. He hadn't pushed, but she'd felt his eyes on her face, reading between lines she'd tried to keep blank. Now, alone in her room, Mavis went to the window and looked down at the street beyond the gate. The black car was gone, leaving only an empty space where it had been. Nothing to worry about. Probably. She reached for her phone, an old habit, checking news from home. She'd almost broken herself of it over the months. Almost convinced herself that Atlanta was a different life, a closed chapter. She scrolled through headlines. Weather. Sports. Local politics. Then she saw it. A small article in the business section, with a photo that made her stomach drop. Tech entrepreneur Mercer Cole returns from extended business trip, announces new international venture. The phone slipped from her fingers and bounced on the bed. Mercer Cole. The name she'd tried so hard to forget. The man whose career she'd nearly ruined when she'd finally spoken up. The man whose family had paid to make her go away rather than face a scandal. The man who had promised, in his perfectly pleasant voice, that he would see her again someday. And now he was back. Starting something international. Moving. Looking. Mavis hugged herself, suddenly cold despite the warm room. The safe little world she'd built over the past 6 months, the breakfasts with Soo-yeon, the quiet evenings in the library, the way Min-woo had started to look at her when he thought she wouldn't notice, all of it felt suddenly so fragile. Like butterfly wings. Beautiful. Delicate. And so easy to break. Something was wrong. Min-woo felt at the moment his driver pulled through the gates of the estate. After 3 days in Busan closing a shipping deal, all he'd wanted was to come home to the new normal. Soo-yeon's excited chatter, maybe something good cooking in the kitchen, Mavis's quiet presence making the big house feel less empty. Instead, the house sat silent. No lights in the windows where they should be. No movement behind the curtains. Wait here, he told his driver, grabbing his overnight bag. The front door opened before he reached it. Mrs. O stood in the entryway, her usual perfect posture slightly stooped. Her eyes were red-rimmed, hands twisting a handkerchief. Min-woo stopped cold. In 15 years, he'd never seen Mrs. O cry. Not even when his wife died. Where is everyone? He asked, setting down his bag. Mrs. O took a deep breath. Mr. Cha, there's something you need to know. What do you mean, gone? Min-woo stood in the doorway of Mavis's room, staring at the stripped bed, the empty closet, the bare dresser top. Mrs. O hovered behind him. 3 days ago. The morning after you left for Busan. I went to wake her for breakfast, and... She gestured helplessly at the empty room. Minwoo stepped inside. The space felt hollow. Wrong. Like someone had erased a person. No note. No message. His voice was too controlled, even to his own ears. Nothing, sir. Her phone's been disconnected. We tried calling immediately. He moved to the dresser, pulling open a drawer. Empty. Another. Empty. The closet held only hangers. The bathroom, no toothbrush, no bottles, nothing. The books she was reading, he asked, thinking of the Korean stories he'd loaned her. The photographs she kept by her bed? Mrs. O shook her head. All gone. She took everything personal. Left only the clothes we provided. Minwoo stood very still, absorbing this. It wasn't just that she'd left. It was how thoroughly she'd erased herself. Like she'd never been here at all. And Soo-yeon? He asked, his chest tight. Mrs. O's face crumpled slightly. She hasn't spoken since. Not a word to anyone. 3 months of progress. Gone in an instant. Where is she now? In her room. She won't come out for meals. We've been bringing trays, but... Mrs. O trailed off. Minwoo nodded once, then headed down the hall, his footsteps echoing too loudly in the quiet house. Soo-yeon's room was dark except for a small night light. She sat on the floor by her bed, surrounded by papers, colored pencils scattered around her. She didn't look up when he entered. Soo-yeon? He kept his voice gentle, kneeling beside her. She didn't respond, just kept coloring, harsh, angry strokes across the paper. I just got home, he said. I heard about Mavis. Nothing. Sometimes people have to leave suddenly, he tried, the words sounding hollow even to himself. Sometimes there are reasons they can't explain. She promised. The whisper was so faint he almost missed it. Soo-yeon still wouldn't look at him, but tears had started rolling down her cheeks. What did she promise, sweetheart? She promised she wouldn't leave me. Soo-yeon's little voice cracked. Like Mom did. Minwoo felt something sharp twist in his chest. He reached out, hesitating just a moment before pulling his daughter against him. She didn't fight, just collapsed into his chest, her small body shaking with sobs. I know, he murmured into her hair, his own eyes burning. I know. They sat like that a long time, Minwoo rocking gently while his daughter cried for another woman who had vanished from her life. But somewhere beneath the grief, something else was building. Something cold and focused. Because this didn't make sense. None of it made sense. I want everything, Minwoo told Director Kang later that night in his study. Airlines. Immigration. Hospitals. Banks. Security cameras. I want to know where she went. Kang nodded, taking notes. Sir, with respect, people leave jobs all the time. Even without notice. Minwoo gave him a look that made the security chief fall silent. Not like this, Minwoo said flatly. Not her. Yes, sir. Kang knew better than to argue. I'll put our people on it right away. For the next 24 hours, Minwoo barely slept. He moved between checking on Soo-yeon and working the phones, calling in favors, pushing his contacts for information. Nothing came back. No airplane tickets. No border crossings. No hospital admissions. No large bank withdrawals. It was like Mavis Tate had evaporated. On the second night, just after midnight, Director Kang returned. His face told Minwoo he'd found something. The car she mentioned, Kang said without preamble. The black sedan she was worried about. I ran the partial plate she gave me. It was a rental. Paid in cash through a shell company. Minwoo leaned forward. And I pulled security footage from the neighborhood, from the days before she left. Kong hesitated. Sir, I don't think she left voluntarily. Min-woo went very still. Show me. Kong opened his laptop, pulled up a file. This is from a convenience store camera in Myeongdong, 2 days ago. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Mavis walking down a crowded sidewalk, shopping bag in hand. She looked over her shoulder once, twice. Her body language screamed fear. A black sedan pulled up alongside her. 2 men got out, well-dressed, efficient movements. They spoke to her briefly. She didn't run. Didn't scream. Just glanced around once more, then got into the car. Freeze it, Min-woo said suddenly. Kong paused the video. Go back 5 seconds, there. The frame showed the car door open, Mavis about to step in. But it was the figure standing by the car that Min-woo was staring at. A man in an expensive suit, watching calmly, smiling slightly, looking directly at the camera as if he knew someone would be watching this footage later. Looking directly at Min-woo. Min-woo stared at that face for a long time. And suddenly, everything he thought he knew about Mavis Tate, about his quiet housekeeper with the sad eyes and the gentle hands, all of it crumbled. Because he recognized that face. He recognized that smile. And what it meant changed everything. Okay, if you're as hooked as I am right now, do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I know, but seriously, this story is about to go places you won't expect. Smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let me tell you who that man in the photograph really was. Young Hyun-soo, Min-woo said, the name bitter on his tongue. Director Kong looked surprised. You know him? Not the Korean. The American standing next to him. Min-woo pointed to the smiling man. Mercer Cole. Tech entrepreneur from Atlanta. Connected to Axis Capital Group. The investment firm? Kong frowned. Why would they be interested in your housekeeper? That, Min-woo said quietly, is what we need to find out. He'd never met Cole personally, but knew him by reputation. The man moved in powerful circles, had connections in both legitimate business and shadier enterprises. The kind of man who solved problems with money, or other means, when money wasn't enough. But what problem was Mavis Tate to him? Sir, Kong said hesitantly. There's more. We did a deep background check on Miss Tate. And? There's nothing to find. No records before 6 years ago. The name, the passport, the education credentials, all created. High quality work, but fake. Kong met Min-woo's eyes. Whoever she is, Mavis Tate isn't her real name. Min-woo absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. The way she never talked about her past. Her hyper-awareness of security. The emergency bag he'd once glimpsed under her bed. She'd been hiding from something. Someone. And now that someone had found her. And Young Hyun-soo? Min-woo asked, his voice dangerously calm. What's his connection? He was in Atlanta 4 months ago. Met with Cole several times. We've been tracking his movements since that situation 3 years ago. Min-woo didn't need to be reminded about that situation. The failed deal. The accusations. The evidence that mysteriously disappeared, leaving Young free while his associates took the fall. The personal grudge that had been simmering ever since. So Young finds Cole, Min-woo said slowly, putting it together. Cole is looking for a woman who disappeared. A woman who somehow ends up in my home, caring for my daughter. His eyes hardened. This isn't coincidence. No, sir, Kong agreed quietly. It looks like a setup. They may have placed her here deliberately. The thought should have made him angry, that Mavis might have been planted in his household as part of some scheme. Instead, all he felt was a cold certainty that whatever her original purpose, something had changed. The Mavis who laughed with his daughter, who sat with him in the library, who looked at him with those honest eyes. That wasn't someone playing a role. And now she was gone. Min-woo stood at the window of his study, the same window where he'd watched Mavis and Soo-yeon bury a butterfly all those months ago. His reflection stared back at him, harder now, colder. He'd let her in. Let her change things. Let her matter. And now someone had taken her. Find everything, he told Director Kong without turning around. I want to know who she really is. What she was running from. And exactly where they've taken her. Sir, this could get complicated. These people. I don't care. The words hung in the air. Final. Absolute. She's not just a housekeeper, he added quietly. Not anymore. The hunt was about to begin. And the people who took Mavis Tate had no idea what they'd just awakened. The file landed on Min-woo's desk with a heavy thud. Director Kong stood at attention, his face carefully neutral. Everything we could find, sir. Min-woo stared at the manila folder. Too thick for comfort. Too many pages for a simple explanation. Tell me, he said, not reaching for it yet. The woman you knew as Mavis Tate never existed, Director Kong said quietly. At least, not officially. But someone else did. Someone with the same face, different papers, and secrets dark enough to chase her across an ocean. Min-woo finally opened the folder. A photograph stared back at him, Mavis, looking younger, hair styled differently, wearing a graduation cap and gown. Her smile reached her eyes in a way he'd rarely seen. He began to read. Her real name was Mavis Angela Tate. She'd kept her first name, maybe because it was easier to respond to something familiar when starting over, or maybe because it was her grandmother's name. A small piece of home she couldn't let go. Born in Atlanta. Raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to put her through college. Graduated from Spelman with honors in hospitality management. Landed a good job at an upscale hotel group. A normal life. A successful one. Until 4 years ago, when she met Mercer Cole at an industry conference. The file contained press clippings, Cole accepting awards, giving speeches, cutting ribbons at charity events. Handsome, polished, heir to a tech fortune. The kind of man who appeared in 30 Under 30 lists and charity gala photos with politicians. On paper, he's golden, Director Kong said, watching Min-woo read. Tech entrepreneur. Philanthropist. Old Atlanta money. Min-woo flipped to the next section. Police reports. Restraining order applications. Hospital records. Off paper, he asked. Controlling. Obsessive. Dangerous. Kang's voice was matter-of-fact. They dated for 8 months. When she tried to end it, things got ugly. The reports told a sickening story. Break-ins at her apartment where nothing was taken, just things moved, to let her know someone had been there. Her car vandalized. Strange calls at all hours. Being followed to and from work. She'd tried the legal route first. Filed for restraining orders. Made police reports. None of it stuck. Too many connections, Min-woo murmured, understanding immediately. In that world? He's untouchable, Kong agreed. His family donates to police foundations. His college roommate is a judge. His father golfs with the mayor. Min-woo continued reading. The timeline accelerated suddenly, Mavis's mother hospitalized after a medication error. Unexpected complications. Death 3 days later. An accident, Director Kong said, the word hollow. She didn't believe that, Min-woo stated. No, sir. A week after the funeral, Mavis Tate disappeared. Bank account emptied. Apartment cleared out. Phone disconnected. 6 months later, a woman with her face but different papers entered South Korea. Min-woo leaned back, processing. 6 months here. Longest she'd stayed anywhere? According to what we found. She moved constantly before. Different names, different cities. Minwoo closed his eyes briefly, picturing Mavis in his library, carefully practicing Korean phrases. Mavis in his kitchen, teaching Soo-yeon to make cookies. Mavis walking beside him in Myeongdong, saying she was running towards something. She'd been planning to stay. He killed her mother, Minwoo said finally. Not a question. Possibly. Nothing proven. Minwoo's jaw tightened. And now he has her. The room fell silent. Outside, Seoul's lights glittered across the darkness, oblivious to the storm building inside this quiet office. There's more, sir, Director Kang said after a moment. He pulled another photograph from a separate envelope and placed it carefully on the desk. It showed a business dinner, fancy restaurant, men in expensive suits raising glasses in a toast. Mercer Cole stood in the center, smiling his practiced smile. And beside him, with the same eyes that had haunted Minwoo's dreams for 3 years, stood Young Tae-jun. Minwoo's cousin. His wife's killer. The man who was supposed to be dead. Minwoo's blood ran cold. When was this taken? 2 months after Tae-jun's supposed death. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Mercer Cole hadn't just happened to find Mavis in Seoul. He was sent here. Sent to use her. To get to Minwoo. The photograph from Myeongdong suddenly made horrible sense, Tae-jun smiling at the camera. Sending a message. We can still reach you. Through the things you care about. Did she know? Minwoo asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Was she part of this? Director Kang shook his head firmly. Everything suggests she was running from Cole, not working with him. Her behavior here was consistent. The fear when she saw that car was genuine. But they placed her here deliberately, Minwoo pressed. In my home. With my daughter. It appears so. Kang hesitated. But whatever their initial plan was, I believe something changed. Minwoo knew what he meant. He'd seen it himself, the way Mavis cared for Soo-yeon, her genuine efforts to build a life here. If she'd been planted as some sort of spy or tool against him, she'd failed spectacularly. Instead of gathering intelligence or gaining leverage, she'd rebuilt what was broken in his household. Made his daughter speak again. Made him feel things he thought had died with his wife. And now they'd taken her. The timing isn't accidental either, Kang added. The Incheon port contract finalizes next week. It would give you control over shipping lanes Young Tae-jun has been trying to access for years. Minwoo nodded slowly. The business reason made sense. The shipping contract was valuable, worth billions over time. But this wasn't really about business. The staged photograph, the way they'd taken Mavis right under his nose, this was personal. Tae-jun wanted him to know who was in control. Minwoo sat back in his chair, pieces connecting in his mind like a puzzle he'd been trying to solve for 3 years. His wife's death. The accident that wasn't an accident. Tae-jun's disappearance. The body that was never confirmed. And now Mavis. The woman who'd brought light back into his home. The woman who'd made his daughter smile again. The woman he'd been too afraid to admit he cared for. They'd taken her to hurt him. To control him. To remind him that no matter how powerful he became, they could still reach the things he loved. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed he would negotiate. Minwoo picked up his phone and made a call. Get me everything on Young Tae-jun. Every location. Every contact. Every weakness. He paused, looking at the photograph of Mavis one more time. And prepare a team. We're going hunting. The warehouse smelled of rust and seawater. Mavis sat in a plain metal chair, hands folded in her lap. Not tied. Not chained. That wasn't Mercer's style. He preferred the illusion of civility. The room they'd put her in had once been an office, desk pushed against the wall, a single window with dusty blinds, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. They'd brought her here after the car ride, blindfolded at first, though she'd pieced together enough to know they were in Incheon. The distant sound of shipping containers being loaded, the particular salt-heavy air. She'd worked in enough ports to recognize the sounds. The door opened. Mercer Cole stepped in, looking exactly as she remembered. Perfectly tailored suit, expertly styled hair, that smile that never quite reached his eyes. He carried 2 paper coffee cups. "I brought you something," he said, setting one cup in front of her. "Americano. Still your favorite?" She didn't touch it. Didn't answer. He sighed, taking the chair across from her. "All you had to do was come home, Mavis." Was that so hard? Home. As if anything with him had ever been home. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. His smile widened. "You were careful. I'll give you that. But you made one mistake." He leaned forward slightly. "You stayed too long." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small stack of photographs, and laid them on the table between them. Mavis's heart sank as she looked at them. Her walking with Soo-yeon in a park. Her shopping in Myeongdong. Her and Min-woo standing close together outside the ice cream shop, something unspoken passing between them. 6 months, Mercer continued. "Longest you've stayed anywhere since you ran. I almost gave up, you know. But then." He tapped the photo of her with Min-woo. "You found another powerful man. I'm almost impressed. But you're mine, Mavis. You've always been mine." She looked up from the photos, meeting his eyes directly. "I was never yours, Mercer. And I never will be." Something flickered across his face, a brief crack in the polished facade. His jaw tightened. Fingers flexed. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the mask slid back into place. "We'll see," he said softly. Across the city, Min-woo stood in his office, surrounded by a team of men poring over maps and security feeds. The car was rented through a shell corporation, Director Kang reported, pointing to documents spread across the desk. "We traced it to 3 possible locations. 2 are empty. The third is a warehouse in Incheon Port District. Recently leased. Heavy security for a storage facility." Min-woo studied the satellite image of the building. "What else?" "Unusual electrical usage. Multiple vehicles coming and going. And this," Kang pulled up a grainy security image from a nearby building. "2 men who match our targets, entering yesterday evening." The photo showed Mercer Cole, dressed impeccably as always. Beside him, partially turned away but unmistakable to Min-woo, Young Tae-jun. "That's them," Min-woo said quietly. "That's where they're holding her." "Sir." Director Kang hesitated. "This feels like a trap. They must know we'd trace them." "Of course it's a trap." Min-woo's voice was ice cold. "They want me to come. That's the point." "Then we should." "We go tonight," Min-woo cut him off. "Prepare the team. I want our best men. Full security protocol." Kang nodded, knowing better than to argue. "Yes, sir." As the team dispersed to prepare, Min-woo moved to the window. The city spread below him, lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. Somewhere out there, Mavis was waiting. Probably afraid. Possibly hurt. Because of him. He pulled out his phone, checked the time. One more thing to do before they left. "Why am I really here?" Mavis asked after a long silence. Mercer looked up from his phone. "I told you. You ran away. I found you. End of story." "No." She shook her head. "You partnered with someone local. Someone who knew where to look. This isn't just about me. Before Mercer could answer, the door opened again. The man who entered was Korean, around Minwoo's age but leaner, sharper somehow. He wore his expensive suit like armor. His eyes assessed Mavis briefly before dismissing her. "Everything's ready," he asked Mercer in English. "Right on schedule." Mercer gestured to Mavis. "She's been asking questions. Getting curious about why she's here." The man smiled thinly. "Americans. Always needing to understand everything." He switched to Korean, clearly assuming she wouldn't understand. "My cousin will come for her. He won't be able to help himself." Mavis kept her face neutral, grateful for those months of language study. "Cousin?" She watched them carefully, piecing together fragments of their conversation. "We're sure he's found this location?" the Korean man asked, back in English. Already tracking his team's movements, Mercer confirmed. "They'll be here tonight." Mavis felt cold dread settle in her stomach. They wanted Minwoo to come. This was all about him. And she was the bait that would bring him into danger. Soo-yeon sat cross-legged on her bed when Minwoo entered. She didn't look up, just kept arranging colored pencils in a perfect line. "I have to go out for a while," Minwoo said gently, sitting beside her. Still no response. "I'm going to find Mavis." At this, her hands stilled. "She didn't leave because she wanted to," he continued. "Someone took her. Bad people. But I'm going to bring her back." Soo-yeon turned to look at him finally, her small face serious. "Promise?" The word hit him hard. Mavis had made promises to his daughter too. Promises that seemed broken now. "I'll do everything I can," he said honestly. Soo-yeon reached for something beside her, a small box of colored pencils, worn from use. The ones Mavis had given her that first day. She pressed them into his hand. "Give these back to her," she whispered. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, "Please, Appa." Appa. Father. She hadn't called him that since her mother died. Minwoo pulled his daughter close, throat tight. "I will." Mavis watched the sun set through the dusty window blinds. They'd left her alone again, confident in their security. No guards inside the room, just cameras in the corners and a locked door. She'd spent the past hour mentally cataloging everything she'd seen. 3 men outside her door when they brought her meals. Cameras covering all angles. The main warehouse floor had at least 8 more men. She'd glimpsed them when they transferred her from the car. Too many to fight. Even if she could get out of this room, she'd never make it past them all. But Minwoo was coming. Walking into danger because of her. Mavis stood up, began pacing the small room. There had to be something she could do. Some way to warn him. She examined the door again. Heavy steel, industrial lock. The window. Reinforced glass, too small anyway. The air vent? Barely large enough for her arm. She was still searching when she heard footsteps approaching. Mercer entered with another man, not the Korean from earlier, someone new. He carried a small case. "Time for a change of plans," Mercer announced. "We're moving you to a more comfortable location." Mavis's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Just a precaution." Mercer smiled that empty smile. "Your Korean friend is smarter than we expected. We need to stay ahead of him." The man with the case opened it, revealing a syringe. "Now, this doesn't have to be difficult," Mercer said, his tone reasonable, friendly even. "Just a little something to help you relax during transport." Mavis backed up against the wall. "Don't touch me." The other man advanced toward her, syringe ready. "I always admired your spirit, Mavis," Mercer sighed. "But tonight? I need you compliant." The convoy rolled through the night streets of Seoul, heading east toward Incheon. 5 vehicles. 20 men. Every one of them loyal to Cha Min-woo. In the lead car, Minwoo sat in silence, watching the city lights blur past. In his pocket, a set of colored pencils. In his mind, the sound of his daughter's voice. Bring her back. He would. Whatever it took. ETA 20 minutes, the driver reported. Minwoo nodded, checking his phone. The warehouse schematics had been sent over, old blueprints, but better than nothing. They'd approach from multiple sides. Quick, quiet, efficient. Get Mavis out. Deal with Mercer Cole and Young Tae-jun after. Sir. Director Kang's voice broke into his thoughts. Surveillance team reports movement at the target location. Multiple vehicles leaving the warehouse. Minwoo tensed. Show me. Kang handed him a tablet with a live feed. 3 black SUVs pulling away from the warehouse, heading in different directions. They're splitting up, Minwoo realized. Sir, we have another problem. Kang's voice was tight. Our communications just picked up police chatter. Someone called in an anonymous tip about armed men heading to Incheon Port District. They know we're coming, Minwoo said flatly. What do we do? Minwoo thought quickly, weighing options. Tell teams 2 and 3 to follow those vehicles. We continue to the warehouse. And the police? Avoid them. This needs to stay quiet. Minwoo looked back at the tablet, watching the SUVs disappear in different directions. They're trying to confuse us. Mavis could be in any of those vehicles, or still in the warehouse. As they approached the port district, Director Kang's voice crackled over the radio. Sir, we have a problem. They know we're coming. Minwoo stared at the dark shapes of shipping containers and warehouses ahead. The trap had been set. The question was, who was really walking into it? The warehouse loomed against the night sky, a dark shadow among shadows. Minwoo stood outside, the sea breeze carrying the smell of salt water and rust. Behind him, his men moved silently into position, surrounding the building. All teams in place, Director Kang confirmed through his earpiece. Minwoo nodded. Remember the plan. I go in alone. You move only on my signal. Sir, Kang hesitated, at least let me come with you. No. Minwoo's voice was firm. This is family business. I won't risk more lives than necessary. He checked his watch. Touched the colored pencils in his pocket. Drew a deep breath. If I'm not out in 20 minutes, you come in. Not before. Before Kang could protest again, Minwoo walked toward the entrance. The door wasn't locked, of course not. They were waiting for him. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous, mostly empty except for a few shipping containers and abandoned equipment. Harsh spotlights created pools of light in the center, illuminating 3 figures. Young Tae-jun stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking exactly as Minwoo remembered him, except for the scar that now ran along his left temple. Beside him, Mercer Cole looked more casual but no less dangerous, leaning against a metal table. And there, seated in a chair between them, was Mavis. Minwoo's heart clenched. Her hands were bound in front of her, and a small bruise darkened her cheekbone, but her eyes were clear and fierce. Unbroken. Right on time, Tae-jun called out as Minwoo approached. My cousin was always punctual. Minwoo stopped about 10 feet away, keeping all 3 in his line of sight. It's been a long time, Tae-jun. Not long enough? Tae-jun smiled thinly. Let me guess, you wish I'd stayed dead. That would have been better for everyone, Minwoo agreed coldly. Mercer shifted, studying Minwoo with open curiosity. So this is the famous Cha Minwoo. Somehow I expected someone, taller. Minwoo ignored him, keeping his focus on Tae-jun. Let her go. She has nothing to do with this. Oh, I disagree, Tae-jun replied. Miss Tate has been very useful. The perfect way to get your attention. You always had my attention, Minwoo said. You didn't need to drag others into our business. Taejun laughed, the sound echoing in the empty space. Our business? You make it sound so professional. His smile dropped. You destroyed me, Minwoo. Cast me out of the family. Took everything that was rightfully mine. You destroyed yourself, Minwoo countered. The embezzlement. The drugs. The illegal connections. You brought that on yourself. I built this family. Taejun's composure cracked, his voice bouncing off the warehouse walls. He took a breath, smoothed his jacket. I made the connections that grew our business. Made the deals that quadrupled our profits. And how did Uncle thank me? By handing everything to you. The obedient son he never had. Minwoo's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered briefly to Mavis. She was watching intently, her fingers working subtly at her bindings. So this is about revenge, Minwoo said, drawing Taejun's attention back to him. 3 years of planning just to hurt me. Not just hurt you, Taejun corrected. Replace you. When you sign over the port contracts to me tonight, I begin my return. The prodigal son, back from the dead. And my wife? The words came out before Minwoo could stop them, raw with pain he'd buried for 3 years. Was she part of your revenge too? A heavy silence fell. Mavis went still, eyes widening slightly. Mercer looked between the cousins, suddenly realizing he was witnessing something deeper than he'd understood. Taejun's face softened into something almost like regret. She wasn't supposed to die, he said quietly. The car was meant for you. She wasn't supposed to be driving that day. Minwoo felt like he'd been hit. Even though he'd suspected, hearing the confession made his knees weak. You killed her. It was an accident, Taejun insisted. A message that went wrong. I never wanted Gina dead. For a moment, Minwoo couldn't speak. The grief he'd carefully controlled for 3 years threatened to overwhelm him. His wife. Suyun's mother. Gone because of the man standing before him. I mourned her too, you know, Taejun continued. But business is business. Just like tonight. Sign the contracts, and your new companion lives. He gestured toward Mavis. Refuse, and she joins Gina. Your choice. While the men talked, Mavis had been working steadily at her bonds. 6 years of running, of looking over her shoulder, had taught her things. Like how to get out of zip ties with nothing but patience and the right angle. She caught Minwoo's eye. Just for a second. Long enough for him to notice the slight nod she gave him. He understood immediately. She was almost free. Mercer stepped forward, growing impatient. This family drama is fascinating, but we're on a schedule. He moved toward Mavis. Perhaps we need to show Minwoo how serious we are. Minwoo moved faster than anyone expected. 3 quick steps put him directly between Mercer and Mavis. You want leverage over me, he said quietly. Here I am. Let her go. Minwoo, no, Mavis started. Trust me, he said without looking at her. Mercer smiled, looking to Taejun. Well, this is unexpected. The Korean gangster has a heart after all. I'm not a gangster, Minwoo replied evenly. I'm a businessman. Let's make a deal. Taejun studied his cousin, suspicion warring with satisfaction. What are you proposing? I sign your contracts. Right now. You let Miss Tate walk out that door, unharmed. And why would I agree to that when I have both of you? Minwoo smiled thinly. Because you know me, cousin. If you hurt her, I'll never sign. And I'll spend every resource I have hunting you down, no matter how long it takes. The 2 men locked eyes in a silent battle of wills. He's stalling, Mercer warned. Maybe, Taejun conceded. But he's also right. That's always been your problem, Minwoo. You're too predictable. Too honorable. He nodded to one of his men. Bring the contracts. As the man moved toward a briefcase on a nearby table, Minwoo's hand discreetly moved to his ear. Now, he said softly. The warehouse plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted. Shouts. Footsteps. The crash of something heavy falling. Mavis felt a hand grab her arm. She tensed, ready to fight, then recognized Minwoo's touch. This way, he whispered, guiding her down and behind a shipping container. Outside, car doors slammed. Radios crackled. Minwoo's team moving in with precision, just as planned. When the emergency lights flickered on 30 seconds later, the warehouse looked completely different. Taejun's men were on their knees, hands behind their heads. Director Kang's team had positions throughout the space, weapons ready but not drawn. Mercer Cole was being held firmly by two men near the exit, his perfect suit now rumpled, his face flushed with rage. And Taejun stood exactly where he had been, but now Director Kang stood behind him. It's over, Minwoo said, stepping back into the light with Mavis beside him, her hands now free. You miscalculated, cousin. You thought I'd come alone. Taejun's face twisted. This changes nothing. You can't touch me. I have connections. Not anymore, Minwoo cut him off. While you were setting this trap, I was dismantling your network. Every account. Every ally. Every hiding place. He stepped closer. 3 years was a long time to look for a ghost. I never stopped. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Taejun's face. Take them, Minwoo ordered. As his men moved to secure the prisoners, Minwoo turned to Mavis. Are you hurt? He asked softly. She shook her head. Just the bruise. And my pride. Her eyes searched his face. Your wife. I didn't know. I don't talk about it, he said simply. I understand why. Director Kang approached. Sir, local authorities have been notified. We have everything under control. Mr. Cole will be returned to the United States to face charges there. As for young Taejun, I'll handle him, Minwoo said. Make sure there are no records connecting Miss Tate to any of this. Already done, sir. When Kang stepped away, Mavis looked up at Minwoo. Why did you come? After everything you learned about me, about how I lied to you. You never lied, Minwoo interrupted. You just didn't tell me everything. Neither did I. She almost smiled at that. Still. You risked everything. Not everything, he corrected. Just enough. When the dust settled, Taejun was in custody. Mercer was subdued, finally facing the consequences his money couldn't buy his way out of. And Mavis was standing in the middle of the warehouse, free, looking at Minwoo like she was seeing him for the first time. You came, she said. The same words. The same wonder. Of course I came. The distance between them closed. Not a dramatic embrace, not yet. Just two people standing close, surviving together. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have told you. About Mercer. About everything. I didn't want to put you in danger. You didn't put me in danger, he replied. They did. And they'll never touch you again. I promise. A promise. Like the one she'd made to Soo-yeon. The one she thought she'd broken. There's a little girl waiting for you, Minwoo added softly. She has something to say. Something about colored pencils. For the first time in days, Mavis smiled. The sun was just rising over Seoul when the car pulled up to the Cha estate. Mavis sat in the back seat, watching the familiar gates through the window. 11 months ago, she'd walked through them for the first time, suitcase in hand, with no idea how this place would change her. Everything looked exactly the same. The manicured lawn. The stone path. The imposing front door. But everything was different now. Minwoo touched her hand lightly. Ready? She nodded, not trusting her voice. They hadn't even reached the front steps when the door flew open. A small figure burst out, running at full speed. Mavis. Soo-yeon crashed into her with such force that Mavis nearly lost her balance. Small arms wrapped around her waist, squeezing tight enough to hurt. You came back, Soo-yeon sobbed, face pressed against Mavis's stomach. You came back, you came back. Mavis dropped to her knees, pulling the little girl properly into her arms. Of course I came back, she whispered, her own tears finally breaking free. I promised, didn't I? Appa said you might not come back, Soo-yeon hiccuped, pulling back to look at Mavis's face. But I knew you would. Mavis smoothed the girl's hair, wiping tears from her cheeks. Your dad was just being careful. He didn't want you to be disappointed. But you're not leaving again, right? Worry clouded Soo-yeon's eyes. Even when the bad men are gone? I'm not going anywhere, Mavis promised. She looked up then and saw Minwoo standing in the doorway, watching them. His face was calm, but his eyes held something she'd never seen there before. Something open. Unguarded. Soo-yeon grabbed Mavis's hand, tugging her toward the house. Come on. Mrs. O made your favorite breakfast. And I made you a picture. And I kept your books safe, just like you showed me. As the little girl chattered away, pulling her inside, Mavis caught Minwoo's eye again. A silent understanding passed between them. They were home. Mercer Cole is facing charges in 3 countries now, Director Kong reported. A week had passed since the warehouse. They sat in Minwoo's study, Minwoo behind his desk, Mavis in the chair opposite, Director Kong standing with his ever-present tablet. The Americans want him for financial crimes and stalking across state lines. Korean authorities have him for kidnapping and corporate espionage. His own board has turned against him. And his family connections? Mavis asked quietly. Not as helpful as they once were, Kong replied. His father publicly disowned him when the evidence became impossible to ignore. It seems Mr. Cole had several other victims who've come forward now that he's in custody. Mavis nodded, absorbing this. After years of running, of looking over her shoulder, it was hard to believe it might actually be over. And Taejun? Minwoo asked. Securely held. The evidence we gathered, combined with what was found at his properties, should keep him locked away for a very long time. Kang's usually stern face softened slightly. Your wife's case has been reopened. They're treating it as homicide now. Minwoo closed his eyes briefly. Good. She deserves justice. We've also cleared any connection between Miss Tate and these events in the official record, Kong continued. As far as authorities are concerned, she was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thank you, Mavis said. When Kong left, Minwoo looked at her across the desk. Your identity has been restored as well. Your real passport. Your credentials. Everything Mercer took from you. I heard, she said. Thank you. You're free now, he said simply. Free to go wherever you want. Back to Atlanta, if you wish. She heard what he wasn't saying. The question he was too proud, or too afraid, to ask directly. I need some air, she said, standing up. I'll be in the garden. The stone bench was cool beneath her. The same bench where she'd sat with Soo-yeon all those months ago, looking at a dead butterfly. Where everything had started to change. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. She didn't need to look up to know it was Minwoo. He sat beside her, leaving a careful space between them. You could leave now, he said after a long moment. Go back to Atlanta. Rebuild your life. I could, she agreed. They sat in silence, watching leaves drift down from the trees. Fall was coming. Another season. Another change. But I don't want to, she finally said. Minwoo turned to look at her, his face guarded. Why not? How could she explain it? That after years of running, of never letting herself belong anywhere, this place had become her anchor? That a silent little girl and her broken father had somehow become the most important people in her world? Because my life is here now, she said simply. With Soo-yeon. With. She looked at him directly. With you. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe. Or fear. I'm not an easy man to be with, he said quietly. I have enemies. Complications. A life that isn't simple. I know. Soo-yeon adores you. I adore her too. And I. He stopped. Started again. I've been cold for a long time. Since Eun-ji died. I thought I would never. He couldn't finish. Didn't have the words. But Mavis understood. She reached over, taking his hand in hers. His fingers were warm, strong, closing around hers immediately. You don't have to be cold anymore, she said softly. He looked down at their joined hands. No, he agreed. I don't. The morning light streamed through the kitchen windows, turning everything golden. 3 months had passed. Winter was giving way to spring, snow melting, the first green buds appearing on the trees. Mavis flipped pancakes at the stove while Soo-yeon sat at the table, coloring and chattering between bites of breakfast. And then Min-jae said her mom might get a puppy, but I told her cats are better because they're quieter, and quieter is better for thinking, right, Mavis? Both are good, Mavis laughed. It depends what you want. I still want a cat, Soo-yeon declared. A black one with green eyes. We'll see, Mavis said, the standard parent answer that neither promised nor denied. Footsteps in the hallway announced Minwoo's arrival. He walked in straightening his tie, looking every inch the business executive he was. But his eyes were different now. Softer when they fell on his daughter. Warmer when they met Mavis's. He stopped to kiss Soo-yeon's forehead. Be good at school today. I'm always good, she protested. Usually good, he corrected with a small smile. He moved to the stove, pausing to kiss Mavis's cheek, a casual gesture that still made her heart skip. Natural. Easy. As if they'd been doing this forever. Dinner tonight? He asked, accepting the coffee she handed him. I was thinking we could try that new place in Buckshin, Mavis suggested, flipping another pancake. Soo-yeon wants to go. The tea house? Apparently, they have special pastries, she confirmed. Honey pastries. Soo-yeon chimed in. With nuts and cinnamon. Minwoo smiled, a real smile, the kind that used to be so rare but now appeared almost daily. Tea house it is, then. He glanced at his watch. I have to go. Board meeting. Go save the business world, Mavis teased. He caught her hand as he turned to leave, giving it a gentle squeeze. Another small gesture. Another piece of the language they were building together. After he left, Soo-yeon looked up from her coloring. Mavis? Are you happy here? The question caught her by surprise. Of course I am. Why do you ask? Soo-yeon shrugged. Sometimes grown-ups say they're happy but they're not really. They just don't want kids to worry. Mavis set down her spatula and came to sit beside the little girl. I am really, truly happy, she said seriously. Happier than I've been in a very long time. Soo-yeon beamed. Good. Because I'm happy too. And I think Appa is happy. He smiles a lot more now. I've noticed that, Mavis agreed. He smiles because of you, Soo-yeon said with the simple certainty of childhood. Then she went back to her coloring, subject closed. Later that night, after Soo-yeon was asleep and the house was quiet, Mavis stood at the window of her room, their room now, watching the city lights below. She thought about Atlanta. About Mercer. About all the years she spent running. She thought about a dead butterfly and a little girl who'd forgotten how to speak. She thought about a cold man with warm eyes who turned soul upside down to find her. She wasn't running anymore. She was home. And sometimes, the best stories aren't about fairy tales or perfect endings. They're about two broken people who found each other in the most unexpected place. Who fought through darkness to find something worth protecting. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, do me a favor. Smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it the butterfly scene? Minwoo at the warehouse? Suyun's colored pencils? I really want to know. And if you haven't already, check out my other stories. There's so much more waiting for you. Thanks for watching until the end. It means everything. See you in the next one.